Within the next minutes, you will see the ghost in the machine of our global economy, a fatal disease that has infected and killed every single major economic empire in history. And by the end of this, you will see with terrifying clarity that the same disease is now in its terminal phase within our own system. This is the darkest series we have ever produced, but it is also the most vital, because for those who can read the patterns of the past, it doesn't have to be a death sentence. It can be a survival guide. Let's travel back to the 16th century. Imagine you are a Spanish conquistador, not the romanticized version, but a desperate, greedy, and ruthless man. You've crossed an ocean on a gamble. You are in Potosí, in modern-day Bolivia, standing at the foot of the Cerro Rico, the rich mountain. It's not a mountain of dirt and rock to you, it's a mountain of solid silver. The air is thin, your lungs burn, and the sound of indigenous slaves hammering at the rock is a constant grim symphony. You are quite literally shipping a mountain of money back to Spain. For a while, it feels like heaven. Spain becomes the superpower of the world, flooding the globe with silver reals. They build an armada so powerful it seems invincible. There is a joy and euphoria, a sense of divine right and endless wealth. But this is the first stage of the disease, the injection of what seems like free money. But here's the crazy story, the part they don't teach you in school. All that silver had a devastating side effect. It created the world's first documented hyperinflation. You see, Spain was importing so much silver that the metal itself became common. The sheer volume of it flooding into Seville devalued the currency. Prices for everything, food, cloth, land, exploded. By the early 17th century, the price of wheat in Spain had increased by over 500%. Think about that. The average Spaniard who never saw a silver coin from the New World was now paying 5 times more for a loaf of bread. The empire, dripping in silver, was going bankrupt because the very source of its wealth was destroying its purchasing power. The King of Spain, Philip II, defaulted on his debts not once, not twice, but 4 separate times. This is the shock, the moment the free money reveals itself as a poison. The empire that controlled the world's money supply was financially hollowed out from within. The joy of conquest was replaced by the shock of economic collapse. The pattern was set. An influx of easy money creates a spectacular but utterly fake boom that inevitably sows the seeds of a devastating bust. Now, let's pivot to the most famous crash of all, 1929. We all know the black and white photos of men in suits looking despondent on Wall Street. But the real story, the historical precedent, begins not in 1929, but in the roaring, credit-fueled party of the 1920s. This was the era of the margin loan. Imagine you're a shoeshine boy in 1928. You've heard the stories. Your cousin, a banker, bought a new Cadillac. The guy who sells you newspapers is talking about his stock picks. There's a feeling in the air, a contagious joy, a belief that the old rules don't apply. So you scrape together $100, but you don't just buy $100 worth of stock. You go to your broker and you get a margin loan. You can now buy $900 worth of stock. You've just leveraged yourself 9 to 1. If the stock goes up 10%, you've doubled your money. This wasn't just for the wealthy. This was for everyone. It was a national delusion of grandeur built on debt.
The proof of this insanity is in the numbers. By the summer of 1929, margin loans had ballooned to a staggering sum, with brokers' loans reaching over $8.5 billion, a massive figure for the time. The entire stock market was being propped up by this pyramid of debt, and when confidence wavered even slightly, the entire structure had to collapse. There was no circuit breaker. A 10% drop meant you lost your entire investment and owed your broker money you didn't have. This triggered forced selling, which triggered more panic in a death spiral. The shock of the crash wasn't just the loss of paper wealth. It was the realization that the prosperity of the entire decade was a mirage, a collective hallucination paid for with money that never really existed. The system was fundamentally unreliable because it was built on a foundation of sand, speculative, unregulated credit. But what about 2008? Surely we learned our lesson. We built safeguards. We have the Federal Reserve, the SEC, sophisticated financial instruments to manage risk. The joy of the early 2000s was the housing boom, the American dream on steroids. Imagine you're a mortgage broker in 2005. Your phone is ringing off the hook. You're making $20,000 a month. A couple with no jobs, no income, and no assets walks into your office? No problem. It's a ninja loan. You give them $500,000 to buy a McMansion. Why? Because you're not going to hold that loan. You bundle it up with thousands of other risky loans into a magical thing called a mortgage-backed security. You get a ratings agency to slap a AAA super safe rating on this ticking time bomb, and you sell it to a pension fund in Norway. You've just moved the risk off your books. You get your commission. Everyone is happy. The entire global financial system became a game of hot potato with a radioactive debt potato. The case study that proves the sheer recklessness is the story of the Magnetar trade. This was a hedge fund that in 2006 and 2007 actively helped to create and fund billions of dollars worth of the worst possible mortgage-backed securities, the very ones designed to fail. Then, they simultaneously bet billions of dollars against these same securities through credit default swaps. They were literally building a bomb, insuring it, and then collecting the payout when it exploded. This wasn't just gambling. This was financial arson. The shock of 2008 was the realization that the entire global banking system was interconnected through these toxic assets. It wasn't just a housing crash, it was a systemic cardiac arrest of the credit system itself. The reliability of the entire modern financial architecture was exposed as a lie. So, we have three case studies: Imperial Spain with its commodity-driven inflation, 1929 with its margin-driven stock bubble, and 2008 with its securitization-driven credit bubble. Three different eras, three different triggers, but one unifying, terrifying pattern. The disease is always the same: the massive, systemic abuse of credit and the creation of money out of thin air, divorced from real productivity. It creates a period of intoxicating joy and apparent wealth, followed by a brutal shock when the fantasy collides with reality. The system's reliability is always an illusion. But this is where the story gets truly dangerous for us today. Because if you think the abuses of credit in 1929 or 2008 were bad, you haven't seen anything. What has happened since 2008 is not a correction. It is the greatest acceleration of this very same disease in human history. We have taken the worst impulses of every failed empire and financial system and combined them into one supercharged, globalized doomsday device.
The curiosity you should be feeling right now is a single burning question. How could it possibly be worse? How could anything top the total freeze of the global banking system in 2008? The answer lies in the scale. The response to the 2008 crisis was to solve a problem of too much debt by creating astronomically more debt. In 2008, the US national debt was about $10 trillion. Today, it is over $34 trillion and accelerating. In 2008, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet was under $1 trillion. To fight the crisis, they ballooned it to $4.5 trillion. Then, during the COVID-19 pandemic, they doubled it in a matter of months to nearly $9 trillion. We are now in an era of quantitative easing and fiscal stimulus on a scale that makes the Spanish silver fleets and the Roaring '20s margin loans look like a child's lemonade stand. We have injected the equivalent of multiple entire US GDP's worth of liquidity into the system. We have created a world where the money itself is the bubble. This is the ultimate historical precedent. Every single time in history a dominant power has attempted to print its way out of a debt crisis, it has ended in the total collapse of that currency's value and a systemic reset. From the Roman Empire debasing its denarius to the Weimar Republic printing paper marks, the pattern is unforgiving. The disease has metastasized. The patient is showing all the classic symptoms of terminal decline, but on a ventilator of pure, digitally created cash. This brings us to the present day, to the calm before the storm. The joy of the post-2020 stock market rally, the explosion in crypto and meme stocks, the feeling that the government and the Fed will never let the market fall. It's all a familiar echo. It's the same joy the Spanish felt watching the galleons roll in, the same joy the flapper felt dancing the Charleston, the same joy the mortgage broker felt driving his new BMW. It is the joy of the fake boom. But the clock is ticking. The shock is coming. And now, we will descend into the engine room of this coming catastrophe. We will expose the 3 specific ticking time bombs that have been primed to detonate simultaneously in the 2025-2026 window. We are not just facing a repeat of history. We are facing a horrific, synchronized convergence of all its worst failures at once. The next chapter is called the Triad of Failure, and it will show you exactly how the collapse of the dollar, the bond market, and global trust will unleash a crisis from which there is no bailout. This is where we move from diagnosis to prognosis. Your curiosity will turn to cold, hard fear, and that is precisely what you need to be prepared. The period of 2025 to 2026 is not just another cyclical downturn, it is the convergence point for 3 distinct systemic failures. We call this the Triad of Failure: the Great Debt Unwind, the death of the bond market, and the geopolitical trigger. Individually, each would cause a severe crisis. Together, they create a feedback loop of financial destruction that will be worse than 1929 and 2008. Because this time, the escape routes have been welded shut. Let's begin with the first and most monolithic element of the triad, the Great Debt Unwind. You have to understand the sheer, mind-numbing scale of the debt we're talking about. It's not just the $34 trillion in U.S. federal debt. That number is so large, it's become an abstraction. Let's make it real. Imagine a Roman legionary at the time of Christ. He's paid about 300 denarii a year. Now tell him to pay off the U.S. national debt 1 denarius at a time. He would have to work without a single day off for over 113 billion years. He would still be paying it off long after our sun has burned out. This isn't just debt, it's a geological layer of financial obligation. And here's the shock. For years, we've been able to service this debt because interest rates were at 5,000-year lows. It was like paying the minimum payment on a massive credit card with a 0% introductory APR. But that introductory period is over. The Federal Reserve has been forced to raise rates to fight the inflation that their own money printing created. Now imagine that credit card company just jacked your rate from 0% to 20%. The U.S. government is now spending more on just the interest on its debt than it does on its entire national defense budget. This is not a future problem, it is happening right now. The Congressional Budget Office projects that in just a few years, interest payments will become the single largest line item in the entire federal budget. This is the reliability of the system breaking down in real time. The government will be forced into an impossible choice: print more money to pay its bills, supercharging inflation into hyperinflation, or slash spending on Social Security and the military, triggering a deep, immediate depression. There is no third option. This is the first blade of the scissors, and it is already cutting. This leads directly to the second, and perhaps most misunderstood element of the triad: the death of the bond market. For decades, the U.S. Treasury bond has been considered the risk-free asset, the ultimate safe haven. When stocks crashed in 2008, everyone fled to the safety of U.S. government bonds. This was the bedrock of the entire global financial system. But what happens when the safe asset is no longer safe? What happens when the bedrock turns to quicksand? The bond market is over twice the size of the stock market. Its collapse would make the 2008 banking crisis look like a minor liquidity crunch. The shock is already beginning. In 2022, the UK experienced a mini-budget crisis. The government proposed unfunded tax cuts and the bond market revolted. The price of UK government bonds, or gilts, plummeted, causing their yields, which move opposite to price, to spike violently. This threatened to bankrupt the UK pension funds, which were using these safe bonds as collateral for leveraged bets. The Bank of England was forced to step in and launch an emergency bailout to prevent a total meltdown. This was a warning shot. It proved that the buyer of last resort for sovereign debt is no longer a foreign country or a pension fund. It is the central bank itself. They are now trapped. If they stop buying bonds, the market seizes up and interest rates skyrocket, crashing the economy. If they keep buying, they monetize the debt and destroy the currency. This is a death spiral. The reliability of the world's most important market is now a complete illusion, maintained only by the constant, invisible intervention of the very institutions that cause the problem. When this finally breaks, the loss of wealth will be so vast and instantaneous, it will make the stock market crash of 1929 look like a minor correction. The curiosity you should have is what could possibly be the match that lights this fuse? The answer lies outside our borders. This brings us to the third and final element of the triad, the geopolitical trigger. History shows us that financial crises are rarely just about numbers. They're about people, power, and perception. The collapse of an empire's finances is almost always accompanied by a collapse of trust and a shift in global power. We are witnessing this play out in real time. For the past 80 years, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency. This exorbitant privilege has allowed us to run massive deficits and export our inflation to the rest of the world. But that era is ending. The case study here is the slow, deliberate move by the BRICS nations and other major economies to create an alternative financial system. They have watched us weaponize the dollar through sanctions, and they have seen our political dysfunction. They are no longer willing to hold their wealth in an asset we can freeze with the click of a button. The inspiration for them and the terror for us comes from a crazy story from the 1960s. It's called the gold pool. In the post-war era, the US and its European allies conspired to secretly manipulate the gold market to maintain the $35 per ounce price and uphold the Bretton Woods system. They would sell gold to suppress the price whenever it rose. But by 1968, the French, under Charles de Gaulle, grew suspicious. He famously sent the French Navy across the Atlantic to physically retrieve France's gold reserves from the vaults of the New York Fed. He didn't trust the American promise of gold-backed. His actions broke the gold pool and contributed to the eventual collapse of the Bretton Woods system. Today, we are seeing a digital, 21st century version of de Gaulle's warships. Nations are repatriating their gold at an alarming rate, and they are setting up bilateral trade agreements that bypass the dollar entirely. The trigger for the 2025-2026 crisis could be something as simple as a major oil producer like Saudi Arabia accepting payment for oil in a currency other than dollars. This would shatter the petrodollar system that has underpinned dollar demand for 50 years. Once that trust is broken, the foreign demand that has funded our deficits will evaporate. The dollar will crash, and the Fed will be forced to print money on a scale that makes the COVID printing look prudent, hypercharging the inflation that is already eating away at the economy. This is the final blade of the triad, and it is being sharpened in plain sight.
So we have the three blades: the great debt unwind creating an internal fiscal crisis, the death of the bond market destroying the core of the financial system, and the geopolitical trigger severing the dollar's lifeline. Individually, they are catastrophic, but their true power is in their convergence. They form a feedback loop of doom. A loss of faith in the dollar, trigger, forces foreign selling of U.S. bonds, bond market, which pushes interest rates higher, making the U.S. debt burden unsustainable, debt unwind, which forces the Fed to print, which further destroys faith in the dollar, and the loop repeats, faster and faster until the system shatters. This is why 2025-2026 will be worse than 1929 and 2008. In 1929, the gold standard acted as a brake. In 2008, the dollar's status as the reserve currency gave the Fed the power to bail out the world. Today, we have no brakes, and the world is preparing to abandon our lifeboat. The shock of this realization should be profound. The reliability of everything you've been taught about money, safety, and the global order is about to be tested to destruction. But this does not have to be the end of your story. While the diagnosis is dark and the prognosis is grim, there is a path through the storm. The chaos of a collapsing system is also the birth of a new one. The inspiration comes from history itself. Those who saw the patterns in the Roman denarius, who understood the fragility of the Weimar mark, who recognized the insanity of the South Sea bubble, they didn't just survive, they positioned themselves to thrive in the new world that emerged from the ashes. The key is knowledge. The key is understanding that while the system may be doomed, you are not. Your journey does not end here with this frightening conclusion. The most critical information is what you do next. How do you protect your wealth? Where can you find safety when no asset is safe? This is the subject of our final and most important video, the Archaic Revival, the 3 assets that will survive the Triad of Failure. In it, we will move from fear to strategy, from problem to solution. We will delve into the historical assets that have outlived every fallen empire and every collapsed currency. This is not financial advice, it is a historical education for survival. The storm is coming. It is time to build your ark.